Yeah, so welcome to the Live with Impact Hub event. Next slide, please. For those of you who don't know, the Impact Hub network is a global network of spaces, entrepreneurial communities, entrepreneurs themselves, who are coming together basically to work together in creating a more just and sustainable world. Our community is 24,000 plus members strong at this point. We're in more than 100 cities, we're 100 locations across the world, in more than 60 countries. And we've been at this for just over 15 years. Our network began in Islington in the UK in 2005, and now we have so many of these different spaces across the world. So it's been coming together really well over these past 15 years. Next slide, please. So what is Live with Impact Hub then, in the context of this global network? So I myself joined the network about 5 years ago now. And just so you know, my name is pronounced Tapiwa. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I work within the Impact Hub Global team as the global development lead, but my work is focused on Africa. So I've had a little bit of time to get to know the network within Africa, but also outside of it. And what I've learned in these past 5 years or so is that we're always, trying to find these ways to connect the global community. All of these 100 spaces, try to find a way for them to kind of come together, get to know one another, but also for the local members to have a sense that there's a network beyond just their local impact hub. And so one of the kind of early events that I experienced within the Impact Hub network was something called a mashup, where impact hubs from different cities would basically host this event simultaneously around the same theme or topic. And essentially they'd all have a local event, but then connect with one another when it was time to have the keynote speech within that event. So it gave this sort of local and global vibe to the event. And I thought it was, a really nice way to be welcomed into the network. And since that time, 4 or 5 years ago, I think we've transformed the ways in which we host these global interactions. So last year we put all of the plans together, as everybody did, in the early days of last year. Of this is the way that we want to build on the mashup idea, build on these global events. And as the world did for everybody, things changed. The pandemic hit us, but though it was kind of a tough period because of what was going on, I think we saw a really great opportunity for us to accelerate actually this idea of the global event that we were thinking about, but have it entirely virtual. So that's how the Live with Impact Hub event came to be. Initially, we were focused, specifically on kind of COVID response type topics, bringing people in around remote work, around feeling isolated. But I think the topics have now expanded, just like they have for our session today, which is all about innovation hubs for diverse and inclusive cities. And so that's what we've invited you to join us to have a discussion about today. And I have three panelists with me. Thanks for taking the risk, three panelists. So we have with us Grace Rodriguez, who's based in the US, Kamran, who's based in the UK, and also Talita, who's joining us from Brazil. And we'll be having, just a casual discussion about this topic and how all of these different actors are kind of viewing the topic within their local ecosystem and local context. So you can see we have like 4 continents hosts represented here. So I think, makes for a good discussion. And in terms of the discussion, I also want to just highlight the housekeeping that we have for the audience. So be sure to keep your cameras off, your microphones off, name yourself with your name, organization, location. And in case you want to add to the discussion, you're welcome to drop your questions, ideas, and reflections in the chat, and we'll be sure to come back to those within the context of the discussion that we're having. So let's hop into it with the first question to the panelists. I'm going to put it out there to all of the panelists to answer because we've not gone into depth about who you are. So as you speak about who you are, each of you. Please also answer the question, um, when, where, and how do you see diversity, equity, and inclusion happening within your city or your country, and how does that have an impact on your work, or how does your work fit into that? So I'm going to start with Talita. Talita, do you mind sharing first about yourself and a response to the question?
Thank you, Tapio. It's great to be here again. I always like to say that once you are part of the network, you will be always part of the network, because somehow we are connected for the same purpose. So it's really nice to be here, especially talking about this topic. I'm Talita. I'm talking from Brazil. I used to be maker at Impact Hub Floripa. And also I did a very nice and deep work with the network, talking and reflecting around this topic in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I did deep conversations with founders from different impact hubs around the world. And we find out that we have some similarities around the topics, and we wrote down a toolkit that hopefully is helping local impact hubs to improve their diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. I'm an anthropologist, and also I have a master in education and inclusion. And at this moment, after 3 long and very nice years as a maker at Impact Hub Floripa, now I have I'm myself an entrepreneur, so I'm trying to put in practice everything that I learned with our members, and I have my own consultants. It's called Singe, and we work with big companies in Brazil, especially tech companies, and helping them to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. It's been very powerful, this work, because this agenda is very much alive in Brazil, especially after the events that we lived last year after George Floyd fact. So after this, somehow the companies in Brazil start to take a look a bit more deeper in these talks, especially in the racial agenda. So we have lots of opportunities to have brave and transformation conversations with our clients, with these companies around the topic, especially around how can these companies to be more diverse in terms of gender and race, and how this company can go a bit deeper in their agenda and just not hire diversity, but also start programs developing these professionals and making sure that they have inclusive agenda. So this is the stuff that I've been doing. I'm fully in this topic. I'm very passionate of this topic, and I really believe that in the Brazil context, if we don't have a very serious and intentional action around inclusion, especially gender and race, we will not be able to be just a country with much more justice, and a country where people have the same opportunities, doesn't matter who they are. So this is my daily life, and it's really good to be here, and it will be really nice to share with you guys the thoughts that we are having in our consultants. Thank you, Tapiwa.
Thanks, Talita. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, super interesting to hear about the work that you're doing with Singa, and also how the US inspired us to have more of these conversations, despite the challenging events around it. I think it's good for everybody to sort of take a moment to think more deeply about it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Grace, could I hand it over to you, being from the US
Sure.
and sparking this inspiration?
Yeah,
Please
it's
go
very
ahead.
interesting mentioning George Floyd, because his service was here, and he's from Houston, and it was very moving to see how diverse, and how supportive our community is. So I'm Grace Rodriguez, co-founder and executive director of Impact Hub Houston, And my background, my academic background is actually cognitive neuroscience research and psychology and fashion design. And then I went into consulting, doing marketing and branding. I've worked in municipal government. I've managed DJs, been in entertainment, consulted a lot of startups, and that led to me working for a venture capital fund, and then worked with a creative agency, and then TED Talks, and then invested in a bar for my 40th birthday. So I'm a small business owner as well, and was looking for something to do to support more people with great ideas. And a friend of mine reached out and asked if I'd be interested in this new project, which led to the launch of a tech startup hub called Station Houston. And as we were running that, Natasha Azizi and Sheree Spandiar came and were asking for mentorship and advice and connections to network because Natasha was interested in launching Impact Hub in Houston. And so that's how I started getting involved in Impact Hub. And after a couple of years, they reached out and asked if I would be interested in taking more of a hands-on leadership role. And that's how I became the co-founder and executive director for Impact Hub. And the question of when, where, and how do I see diversity, inclusion, and equity happening? I see diversity everywhere in Houston. So I'm originally from New York. I was born in Queens in New York City. And at that time, it was the most ethnically diverse city. And now Houston is the most ethnically diverse city. So for us, diversity is everywhere, right? And it's not just in color or ethnicity, but also generation, age, where you are in the psychological spectrum, where you are with your health. There's just so many ways of thinking about diversity. The problem is inclusion isn't everywhere. And so I think that's one of the challenges that Impact Hub Houston exists to address, is how do we help make a more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem? How do we make how do we lead by example and show people how we can have more inclusive communities and more inclusive economies and more equitable economies? Because we have a lot of policies that have been passed, especially over the past decade, where a lot of people who are from what we call minority communities, or in the States, you've seen that when we talk about minorities, it's really about colorism, about what Black and Brown communities or Asian communities or South Asian communities, and how they're not often included in the equitable parts of our economy. So they're not able to participate fully in the workforce, or getting the same kind of support when they start their own businesses, or getting investment as they grow their businesses. So all of those things fit into our work because that's what we center our work around. And we want to make sure that we are leading it by example and building a more inclusive and equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Wow. Thanks so much, Grace. We'll definitely come back to you about exactly what's happening there on the ground in terms of the work that the members are doing. But thank you so much for sharing that introduction. Kamran, over to you.
Thank you, Tapiwa. So my name is Kamran Rashid, and I'm the co-founder and chief executive of Impact Hub Bradford. Bradford is a city which is kind of 200 miles north of London, and it's a 45-minute drive east from Manchester. And if there's any football fans in the room, most people know Manchester because of the football teams. So we're about 45 minutes from there. Bradford is the sixth biggest city in the UK by population. We are one of the most diverse cities in the UK as well, with over 150 languages spoken in our district. We were once upon a time, the funny thing is, once upon a time, we were one of the richest cities in the UK with Bradford. And over the past couple of decades, we've seen a decline of that, and we've had, major economic impacts here. And there's a really negative kind of view of Bradford in the public discourse historically. And that's been partly because we're seen as a city with a lot of immigrants, a lot of migrants. It's a very diverse city. Things are starting to change now, and I think Bradford is definitely seeing a few markers which are showing that it's a city on the rise. But impact of being based in a district like Bradford, it's important because if we're going to serve our district, then diversity, inclusion, and equity, it has to be at the heart of what we do, because the district is so diverse, we have to be able to respond to that. And I think if you ask the question, where do you see DEI happening? In Bradford, it's everywhere. It's on the buses, it's in the shopping malls, it's when you go to your local restaurant or the health centre. It's happening everywhere, people from different communities crossing. And when we talk about diversity, I like the point that Grace mentioned as well, which is diversity is not limited to just race. And I think we can easily just say it's an ethnic thing or a national thing, but diversity in Bradford also is we've got, 2/3 of our district is rural. We've got 50% of our population under the age of 25. We've got a very young population. There's diversity there. There's diversity around class. We've got some of the richest neighborhoods in the UK, which make up our metropolitan district. Yet we've got areas that are the highest on the indices of multiple deprivation in the country as well. So there's diversity at many different levels, and I think for us at Impact of Bradford, we see our role of serving the district in its entirety. And if we are to serve the district, then diversity has to be at the heart of what we do. And just a little bit about myself. So I think we're one of the newer hubs to the global network. We joined last year. Prior to that, I was working for the largest foundation of funding foundation in the UK that supports social entrepreneurs. It's a charity called Unlimited. My background is my degrees in youth and community work. I have a master's in international politics and security studies, and diversity and inclusion for the past 20 years of my career has been at the heart of what I do. So yeah, and I'd just like to say actually, Tapua, to the Impact of Global team, thank you for inviting me to sit on this event and share my experiences today. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamran. Yeah, very happy to have you, and welcome to the network as one of the newer hubs. It's really great to have you. So moving on, with the questions, I think all of you mentioned how diversity, equity, and inclusion is sort of more in the public space, given the events that happened last year within the US, and also that you're just seeing this within your cities generally as they're diversifying over time. And so I read in a PwC study that 75% of organizations now have diversity and inclusion as sort of a focus or a value in what they're doing. But I wanted to give a question now to Talita about, what really is diversity, equity, and inclusion for an organization like Singe that's, really working on this consulting around the topic.
Okay, I think we had some good examples in this introduction with Grace and Kamran around what is this topic, but it's important to define the three because they should work together, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's great when Grace says there is diversity everywhere, but I cannot see inclusion everywhere, because usually this is the reality. So diversity refers to anything that sets one individual apart from other, including the full spectrum of human demographic difference, as well as the ideas, backgrounds, opinions that people bring. There is this generation level, there is many different levels of these things that make us different individuals. And it's really important to celebrate diversity as a very human source. But when we are talking about inclusion, it implies culture and environment feeling of belonging. And I really like in Singe, we work a lot with the belonging, the belonging concept that it's around. It's important for the people feel that they can feel valued, they can feel respected, they can feel encouraged to fully participate and be able to be their authentic selves. So when we are talking about inclusion, we are talking about how can we create environments where people can feel connected with the culture, with the people, with the purpose. So how can we create environments where people feel that they can be themselves, that they can feel comfortable in the space, in the environments? And how can we create environments where people feel that they are really contributing? Because sometimes we think in terms of inclusion, just like inviting people to be part of something, but we would not honor the legacy that they can bring to our communities, for example. So it's important to make sure that we create opportunities for people to contribute, to bring their value to the table. And equity is the fair treatment for all. So when Grace is saying that it's important to be aware of if people have the same opportunities for work, for example, it's important to deliver the same opportunity. But when we are talking in an equity approach, we should be aware about the different experience and make sure that the same opportunity is the opportunity that fits for that audience. So a equity approach, it's about to eliminate inequities and eliminate barriers and make sure that we are aware where are the disproportionality, where are the disparity in our society, and trying to undoing this with lots of intentionality. So it's really important to, because for a long time, the companies and the organizations were talking just about diversity or just about diversity and inclusion. But I really like to think about this equity approach, because the equity approach is what is going to move the agenda. It's what is going to make the huge impact or the huge transformation in the society.
Thanks, Talita. Thank you. And I think, yeah, it's good that we sort of separated out that diversity, equity, and inclusion right from the intro. I think usually, it's sort of bundled together as one, but yeah, I think through this discussion, we can see that all of these things are individual within themselves. And I think when you were talking to Lita about encouraging people, empowering people, and having spaces for them to really work on these different separate areas, I thought it would be a good question to pass on to Grace and Kamran, because they are building these types of spaces. So it'd be really interesting to hear maybe about some of the members that you have within your spaces and what they're doing to sort of move this agenda in the right direction. And I'm going to hand it to Kamran first, since Grace spoke first last time.
Thank you. So one member that comes to mind straight away is Fawzia Naseem. Fawzia Naseem is a South Asian woman, and South Asian women in Bradford district make up 75% of our unemployment market. So South Asian women, whether it's cultural or other reasons, are significantly underserved and underrepresented in a lot of arenas. Fawzia's organisation is called Hop On, and we've supported her, including she was one of the participants on the global Close the Gap program with Adidas. And Fawzia works with South Asian women to build their confidence and get them connected to more public services through cycling. So she goes and actively engages South Asian women to participate. And I think why that's important with diversity and inclusion is that some of these communities that are not normally at the table, that are not included, they may have additional challenges that we have to address first around confidence, around aspiration, around engagement. And only then can we move them along that journey. And Fawzia does that. She engages them and helps them build their confidence. Another one is a gentleman called Ben, who runs Solidaritech. And Ben was actually one of the speakers on the Global Makers Festival a few months ago, I think it was. And Ben works with refugee and asylum seekers, and where big corporations would otherwise dispose of technology within their organizations, Ben takes them computers and laptops and tablets and works with asylum seekers and refugees. But by that, again, going to the point of engaging with them, supporting them through an initiative, and then being able to signpost them to other services, I think is one of the kind of parts of a journey on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think they're two members that stick out. There's many more. Some of them don't do it actively to say that we're addressing diversity, but because of the nature of the leadership of their organization, being leaders of lived experience, means that they are able to address issues around DEI. But I'll pass back to you, Tapiwa, there.
Thanks, Kamran. Thanks. And what I'm taking from that is how proactive the work around this needs to be. And I think I'll come back to Talita on that after Grace speaks. But Grace, do you have any example from your members that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tapiwa. So I think all of our members, honestly, are working towards inclusion and equity as well. But some of the first spotlights that come to mind are Jeff Miller, whose company Potential Workforce is helping people on the autism spectrum integrate better and be prepared to enter the workforce, the corporate workforce. And they also consult corporations on how to make sure that you're providing a welcoming environment so that they experience the kind of belonging that Talita was talking about, right? So you want to make sure that they feel like they're part of the community and the team, and they're also set up for success. We have, let's see, Jason Oliver and Andrew Carnavas. They're two different members, different companies. But Andrew's company, Just Add Beats, for instance, provides 21st century learning skills to predominantly students in minority and low income communities. And so he's trying to make sure that they also, that digital divide is bridged, and that more people have access to understanding how to use technology so that they're comfortable with it once they go into the workforce. We have members like Philip Yates, who is also happens to be our board chair, but his company is Equilibrity, and he's helping more diverse entrepreneurs get access to capital. Another member, Abe Chu, he's a co-founder of Nextseed, which has merged with Republic in the past couple of years. They're one of the largest crowdfunding platforms in the US, and they started this communities part of their platform to make sure that more diverse communities can also aggregate and support each other. So we're talking about how do we develop a specific impact community? How do we develop a specific female founders community on those on the crowdfunding platform to make sure that other women who just want to support women entrepreneurs and make sure we provide more equitable progress in those areas can invest in other women entrepreneurs. So yeah, so those are some of the examples.
Thanks, Grace. Yeah, also, I think the theme of proactivity is really coming out a lot, even on your side, Grace. And so coming back to Talita on that, I think my question would be sort of how important is it for organizations to sort of have this more as, beyond their speech, but also, putting these interventions into their daily practices, into their long-term strategies. And I know you've worked a lot with the Impact Hub Network generally and giving advice on this, but you've also worked a lot outside of the Impact Hub Network with Singe. But I wonder whether, you have any sort of ideas to share around the proactive process on the daily and long-term strategies from your experience.
Yeah, Tapio, I would like to highlight you could understand how diverse and how inclusive the members that Grace and Kamran just talked about. But I had a very interesting conversation with Grace when we were building the diversity, equity, and inclusion material. And something that I learned with her was, even before to start to launch the Impact Hub in Houston, she was someone that are always outside of her bubble. She was always joining meetings in outside communities. She was always very interested in topics that she's not directly part of the community, but she was always trying to make her point of view a bit more wild, just trying to understand more what is the entrepreneurs at the communities and the organizations that were working in Houston. And she started to do this job before to start Impact Hub Houston. Why I'm saying that is because this was a very proactive proactivity approach that she had in the beginning of Impact Hub Houston. And this is something that it's a call for all of us, usually, and especially now with the virtual work as well, we are always with the same people. We are always with the same bubble, with the same kind of discussion, with the same, with people that are quite similar to us, and start to understand the different points of view. It's a really nice and really proactive way to understand the diversity in the cities that we are. So in terms of being active, and I really like to share with our clients, with our partners, that it's important to move from what I call a organic field to a intentional field. So, and maybe I'm gonna try to rephrase that. first of all, it's important to ask ourselves why this topic is important to our organization, and why this topic is important to everyone who works with us, how important it is for our members, for our team, for our programs participants. It's nice to find out some time to understand the why, the reason that we want to go a bit deeper in this agenda. Finding the true why and understanding the beliefs and the purpose that will guide our action. So it's important to go to the action, but it's important to go to the action knowing the purpose that are moving us. After that, it's necessary to leave a organic field. This is something that I was telling you. So it's important to move from this organic field where we believe that our organization are based on respect, and therefore people will automatically feel included. So you have to go into an intentional practice field. A very simple example of practice is to take a look at our communities, and maybe maybe ask ourselves who should be here, but it isn't. This is something that I learned with someone in these networks. Who should be here, but it isn't. It's important to make these questions to ourselves in terms of teams, in terms of community, in terms of partners, in terms of program participants, who should be here. Once this question is answered, we need to create intentional strategies to attract these people and this diversity approach. And this is a diverse approach. So understand who should be here, trying to attract these people. This is a diverse approach. But it's just the beginning. When we also should be able to take an honest look to our culture, to our process, and realize the inclusion gaps that we have. And the best way to do that is talking to people and trying to catch how they feel in this environment in terms of connection, in terms of comfort, in terms of contribution. And this is an inclusive approach. The equity approach is about understanding the disproportionality and disparity in a larger context. So when Cameron was talking about his district, he's very aware about this district. He knows where are the disproportionality, where are the disparity, and the actions that Impact Hub Bradford are moving in this direction. So it's really important to take a look in your local society and ask yourselves who is experiencing disproportionality and disparity in my local society. This reflection will guide you identifying the barriers and helping start an intentional action plan to remove this barrier and to be aware of the outcomes for the marginalized and underrepresented people that are really changing. So it's important to, first of all, ask yourself who should be here and it isn't. Ask yourself how inclusive is really your culture in your process. And after that, take a look in your society and try to understand what is your role in terms of making your society less unfair and less unequal.
Thanks very much, Talita. Thanks for that. And I think you hit on an important point about the actions, that really need to be taken. And so just mindful of time and wrapping up the discussion that we have. So I think the last question, following on from Talita's point about actions, and I'm going to put it this time to Grace first. Grace, what do you think could be the most sort of inspiring examples or best cases that you have of DEI actions that really could be taken from the Houston example, the local, and brought about to kind of the network, or something that we can take out, something that the audience can really take home as a best practice?
Sure. Thank you for asking that, Tapiwa. So building on what Talita was saying, what she was referencing, I do try to show up and be present and collaborative in spaces where I'm normally the only one, maybe the only Asian, the only woman, the only person who has an experience with technology, the only person who might be from middle class America. I look for places where I'm the only one who looks and thinks and acts like me. And this is not just to learn from the other people who are very different from me, but also so that they can see people who are different from them, who might be more like me, are not scary. We're not trying to, come in and oppress you and force our opinions on you, but we want to collaborate. And that kind of relationship building and developing that trust is really important to get to a place of inclusion and equity, because it takes people a long time to be able to trust you, to know that you're not going to take advantage of them, and so that you can actually start to work together and support. And even I think for a lot of minority communities in the States, because there's such a long history of oppression and exclusion, that there's so much distrust that it's really hard to say that I'm genuinely wanting to help you. I really want to try to help. It takes that building of trust for them to be able to accept that help as well, right, in a more inclusive way. So where I see it happening is, one, show up, be present, and be open to learning from differences. Bring a lot of questions, and ask genuinely, because when people know that or see that you want to learn more about them and their culture and what they think and what they really think will help them, they start to really open up. And you see at first it's defensive, right? They're just like, who is this person? But then they start to ease up as you continue showing up, right? There's that. And then look for opportunities to collaborate. One thing that we've done since inception of Impact Hub Houston, and that we're seeing more organizations do now, is making sure that when you collaborate, you make sure that there's mutually beneficial relationships that are built. That I'm coming, let's say, for instance, we're helping launch the Black Innovation Corridor in Houston to support Black businesses and entrepreneurs. And so when we show up, we're coming to them and saying, how do we fundraise together? How do we help you raise money and we raise money at the same time? And so maybe we provide programs and we help you develop an ecosystem, and you can use some of our programs or maybe license some of our programs in your space. But how do we develop this relationship and have a dialogue on that, so that it's not us coming to you and saying, okay, this is our proposal, accept it or not. It's no, that we want to co-create, right? And I love that spirit of Impact Hub globally, is that we are all about co-creation. What kind of programs, what kind of environment, what kind of culture can we create together so that it's additive and not, an either or situation? I think one of the falsehoods that's been perpetuated by, I'm Filipina, so a lot of the colonialism is that it's an either or. It's a very binary situation. This person wins or that person wins, right? So we're trying to get away from the zero-sum game and think about how do we be truly regenerative and co-creative, so that we have a much more equitable and inclusive future.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Grace. Kamran, I'm going to pass it over to you to wrap us up here. Yeah, same question to you. How can we sort of extract from the Bradford example something that is a takeaway for the audience, and something that you can offer to the network of Impact Hub as well?
So just a quick point, I kind of speak a lot at these type of events over the past couple of years, and you kind of over prepare thinking I'm not going to have enough content, and it's 3 minutes left for the talk and you just realize, wow, where has the time gone? And I think I'm just really inspired by what Grace said. Now, Houston is probably a worlds apart from the Bradford and the city that I live in, but a lot of what she shares I can really echo. And at some points I was like, can Grace see my notes on the screen? Is she reading my notes? And but there's a couple of real tangible, I think, walk-away points I can give the people that are listening in. Number one, open an impact hub in your district, in your city, in your region, I think is one thing. I know there's someone who's commented in the chat earlier on about they're from Bosnia. Don't think about it, do it. It will definitely contribute to supporting the diversity, equity and inclusion agenda within your district. Do it. And I had a whole speech written about why it would help, but maybe that's another talk for another day. The second thing is, I think Grace touched upon it, collaborate. Collaborating with people can make you feel uncomfortable. Be okay with being uncomfortable. It can make you feel vulnerable, that you're bringing yourself, you're sharing your IP, your space, your resource, your network, etc. But accept that the sum is greater than the parts. When you collaborate, the sum becomes greater than the parts. So collaborate. I think that's the other thing. The third thing is, design programs. I've got this thing, I don't want to keep on designing programs like this is a program for South Asian women in the district, this is a program for African Caribbean men in the district. But how do we design programs that remove the barriers that these communities face to start with? Now, for those of you, and forgive me, I'm sure many of you have seen it, there's an image of 3 children trying to watch a game of football. And on one of them, we kind of give everyone a box each so they can stand above the fence and see the game. And that's equality. And equity is saying, well, that kid is shorter, so he should get 2 boxes. And that child is taller, so they should get 0 boxes. And they all stand, one stands on 2 boxes, one stands on a box, and the other one just looks over. This one exactly, thank you, whoever's sharing that. And then the third one is actually, how do we design a program that removes the barrier so no one needs a box? So really think about that. And I think there's a lot more points I could have given you, but language is also important. Like we use the term minority, for example. Now in Bradford, 35% of our population is from non-white communities. In 2030, so in less than a decade's time, which, you know, in this era, like time just goes by so quick. In 10 years' time, our population will be more than 50% non-white in Bradford. So for us to use that term minority it won't be appropriate. However, will them communities still have the resource, the influence, the power, say, as the white community? So we kind of use the term underserved. So it's about taking ownership that we failed them, the power the system has failed them, rather than them being minority, and also using the term minoritized. It's a thing that's happened to them rather than them just belonging. There's loads more I could say on this. I feel very passionate about this. I feel privileged to have shared the space with Talita and Grace. And Tapiwa, thank you so much. I think I'm bang on 2:45 there, or our local time is 2:45.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you so much for sharing that, Kamran. And thanks to all of you for joining. Yeah, I agree with you, Kamran. Just blinked and all of a sudden 45 minutes gone. So definitely looking forward to another edition, potentially, of this conversation sometime in the future. But yeah, I just want to share my appreciation for the panelists for making the time to join today. Appreciation to the audience also for making the time to listen in. I hope that you were able to extract those nuggets that were shared here to take back to your professional lives, personal lives, wherever it may be, or just be more inspired to investigate this topic a little bit more. And also a special thank you to Andrea and Carol from our global team for working behind the scenes to put this all together. So thank you for that. If you'd like to stay connected with the Impact Hub network, definitely please subscribe to our newsletter. And I'll ask Andrea just to put the link in the chat so people can subscribe. There it is, right there. Efficient she is. And also to Carol, please may you share your email address, because as Kamran said, one of the best ways for you to create this environment locally is for you to open an Impact Hub within your own city if you don't have one already. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how you can do that and what the process is to join our network in all the various ways that people can join, please reach out to Carol. And I see she's just put her email in the chat there as well. We are 2 minutes over time. Thanks everybody so much for joining, and looking forward to seeing you on the next Live with Impact Hub. Take care.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.